So let's peer into what's going on in the world of the Daily Telegraph and see what is new in the free speech wars. The free speech wars, obviously, those of you caught up in the trenches of the free speech wars, are those who may have suffered from uh, advocating for certain views, expressing certain views. We'll see whether these free speech wars are justified. It's early to tell, but this is an example of a win. And I think this is presented as such by the Daily Telegraph. You could see UK News Website of the Year, as they say, at the top of their website. I don't think it is. Civil servant who blew the whistle on political activism wins £100,000 settlement. Anna Thomas raised the alarm over a number of concerns, including a police job seekers event that excluded white men. Alright, I'll bite. What percentage of UK police are white men? Alright, so this is policeworkforce.gov.uk. Alright, well, Google has helpfully brought me straight to the point where I need. That's great, isn't it? The data shows that in 2022, there were 140,288 police officers in England and Wales. The ethnicity was known for 97% of them. Out of the police officers whose ethnicity was known, white people made up 91% in 2022 and 81% of the general population at the time of the 2021 census. Asian people, let's go down. Let's read the government data. Ethnicity dash facts dash figures.service.gov.uk forward slash etc. etc. Asian people made up 3.7% of police officers and 9.3% of the general population, which would tend to suggest they are underrepresented. People with mixed ethnicity made up 2.5% of police officers and 2.9% of the general population. Well, that would suggest that they are represented at roughly the percentage in which they occur in society. That's a win. Black people made up 1.3% of police officers and 4.0% of the general population. So that underrepresentation is something that probably needs to be explored, at very least understood. People from the other ethnic groups made up 0.7% of police officers and 2.1% of the general population. So you can see there's some underrepresentation there. All right, let's go back to the Telegraph. A civil servant was sacked after blowing the whistle on the infiltration of political activism in Whitehall, including the exclusion of white men from a job seekers event. Anna Thomas, 32, has spoken for the first time about how her career was ruined after she warned colleagues that the civil service's duty to maintain political impartiality was breached by the dissemination of critical race theory in the Department for Work and Pensions. Critical race theory in the Department of Work and Pensions. This is the same Department of Work and Pensions that continues to administer universal credit. The same Department of Work and Pensions. I mean, do you want me to? Let's just do some basic stuff. Department of Work and Pensions. Yeah, Department of Work and Pensions. Worst policies. Oh wow, let's go. It's from the LSC in 2010. It's interesting. Cuts to DWP overhead costs threaten the promised benefits of welfare reform. So, for those of you who weren't paying attention, a man called Ian Duncan Smith, who was once in the army, he grew a conscience, went among the people. He wasn't like the other Tories who sit in their ivory towers ivory Bentleys, ivory, I don't know where they sit. He went among the people and talked to them, shaking their hands like a good Christian. And he decided that we should not give people enough money to live. In essence, you know, there was a bit more to it than that. Of course, there were incentives to get back into work, i.e., disincentives for being out of work. There's a really horrendous disability assessment, or fitness to work assessment as they call it, something like that. Avery Hancock. Anyway, let's read what this journalist, or this writer who's writing for the LSE, London School of Economics blog, has to say. The alleged benefits of slashing a further $7 billion from the welfare bill are obviously being debated in the media and protested against on the streets. Remember that? Protest on the streets. What did we achieve? Until we match the protest with the ballot box, we aren't getting anywhere, are we? But what is equally troubling is how exactly the Department of Work and Pensions, DWP, plans to implement sweeping changes to the pension and welfare system when its core budget will be reduced by 26% by 2014-15. And this is ridiculous. Let's look at the demographic shifts that we have in this country. We're growing old. I'm old. I'm hoping that, you know, I've got 2 kids. I'm hoping there's people out there. Well, you know, there's these natalists. If you watch the conservative conferences, all these natalists talking about have 12 British children, have 12, and nobody's got any money. No one's got nowhere to live. Why have 12 British children? God, it's ridiculous. But at the same time, after the financial crash, remember that one? After the financial crash, yeah, they reduced the budget by 26%. And it will have to cut corporate overheads by 40% through nebulous centralization of support services and rationalization of strategy and policy functions. Well, one would hope that this, it sounds like vague gobbledygook. One would hope that whoever had to administer this understood this. It was vague gobbledygook and ignored it. I fear that when they said this, they just realized they'd had to cut essential services instead. The DWP is not the worst off in terms of core budget cuts. Communities and local government faces 51%, the Cabinet Office 33%. But curiously, it is the only department listed in the CSR as having its corporate overheads reduced. Meanwhile, its total departmental expenditure limit is only set to increase from 7 billion in 2010-11 to 7.8 billion in 2014-15. So you can see why, can't you? You can see why the DWP caused such mayhem. You could see why. You could see why it happened over the past 10 years. And you can see why the pension problem is not got better. No one foresaw that. There's no long-term thinking. There was just a short-term austerity. All right, let's go back to this nonsense. I guess this is kind of emblematic of it all, isn't it? I'm spending time talking about this woman. She's received a £100,000 settlement from the government after a 3-year ordeal. I mean, I've seen her on GB News. Like, she's apparently, unfortunately, her marriage is broken down over this stuff. You know, it's a shame. Clearly, whoever she was with either disagreed with her stance or just their marriage didn't work out. That's a shame. She attributed the strain of the experience to the divorce to the strain of the experience. I have no other information apart from having seen her in the media. During that time, she repeatedly tried to raise the alarm about how political activists had infiltrated the civil service, including with resources asking employees to assume they are racist and the promotion of a job seekers event for the Metropolitan Police that excluded white men. We've dealt with that. I think we've dealt with that. I think if you're a white man and you want to become a UK policeman, and you can. I think that's what it boils down to. If you pass their tests, their assessments, go through training, you can. All right. The payout comes amid growing concerns about widespread political activism in the civil service after Baroness Faulkner of Magravine, the head of the Equalities Watchdog, faced an attempted coup by trans activist civil servants. Miss Thomas, a softly spoken mother of one, first wrote down her concerns towards the end of summer in 2020 when she was employed by the DWP as a work coach at a job centre in Portsmouth. DWP employees were directed to an anti-racism hub on the department's intranet, which he says encouraged civil servants to treat racism like COVID-19 and assume that you have it in the wake of the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota. Oh, I'm going to refuse the urge to tell you all my comedic racism stories that I have in the southwest of this country, like the racism that I have experienced. I tell you about it. I'm gonna refuse because it doesn't really matter. But I just got triggered, man. I saw Portsmouth and got triggered. DWP employees, blah blah. The hub was prefaced with a statement by Peter Schofield. Schofield, is that like a normal name now? All right, Schofield. It's a regular UK name. Don't worry about it. DWP's permanent secretary telling staff they were responsible for being actively anti-racist and asking them to make DWP an anti-racist organization, she says. Learning resources shared on the intranet advising staff on how to become race confident included a diagram from the American activist. A diagram from the American activist Ibram X. Kendi, asking staff to admit that you deny racism is a problem and to promote and advocate policies and leaders that are anti-racist. To promote. The reason I'm rereading that bit is because that seems really uncontroversial. To admit that you deny racism is a problem. I mean, I can understand how some people find that problematic. But, clearly there are a lot of people who deny that racism is a problem. And a lot of them seem to pop up on the media outlets that are promoting shit like this. Anyway, and to promote and advocate for policies. Let's highlight this. Let's see if I can highlight this. Ooh, it highlights in green. I can see why they're news website of the year. And to promote and advocate for policies and leaders that are anti-racist. My God, the sheer audacity. Staff were also directed to the work of Robin DiAngelo, a critical race theorist who claims that white people, including children, are inherently racist. I mean, I've read a lot of Robin DiAngelo. I don't agree with all of it. But I would say that a lot of what she says is useful. I mean, I would think most anti-racism training, I used to think it was all a waste of time. That there were just people who were going to keep on doing what they're doing. But you know what? I've got to be a bit more optimistic about the power for change, neuroplasticity, pliability, and the power no, it's not prayer. Power of good people trying to be better. If only they wrote for the Telegraph. It listed a lot of resources that are very politically partial, said Mrs. Thomas. I did raise my concerns that we were only promoting one-sided, very political stuff, not giving a broader overview from perhaps different authors. She says she believed that posts supporting Black Lives Matter and Stonewall, the LGBTQ+ charity, were expressions of those groups' political or social aims, such as defunding the police or enabling people to self-identify as a gender. After posting her concerns on the intranet, she faced a backlash from some colleagues. It felt a lot like gaslighting, she said. Comments saying that you're taking things out of context, you're being politically partial. That was quite disturbing to me because it's just like, this isn't fair. I didn't bring this stuff in. I'm just telling you, this is not neutral at all. Ms. Thomas said she complained to the team responsible for the resources and to the whistleblowing team that she believed the DWP was breaching its impartiality obligations under the Civil Service Code. All right, I'm gonna have to pause that one there. I'm gonna go do some paid labor. Hey, Book of Mormon. All right, controls.